Hi and welcome to Yeshiva Hashem V'Ever. I'm Rabbi David Katz, and this is Parashas Kedoshim. The title of the article is Of Mighty Men and Merit. We're going to discuss Parashas Kedoshim. The obvious translation and the context and inclination of the Parsha is to become holy. What does it mean to become holy? That's the question. But as always, it's going to be a bit of a different angle, the deeper side, and we find an incredible revelation in the Parsha. Quickly, we're going to get into the following topics. A, what is Kedoshim? Parashas Kedoshim, why is it of mighty men and might? What are the mighty men of might? These are the Noahide / Gerim. That we're going to find out the Noahide doctrine is going to be infused with 30 brand new commandments, as found in the tractate Chulin. Intertwined with this teaching in the Talmud, there's a parallel midrashic counterpart to this idea in Parashas Vayechi in the Midrash Rabbah. So we're going to bring that in, explain that. What is the identity of a ger? Where do you have proof of such an identity of the ger? It's a nice idea, but does it exist? Can we definitively say it exists? We're going to find the entire Torah in the Parsha. We're going to find the source of 30 brand new commandments in our Parsha, all sourced accordingly. And a bonus track, this came out in the preparation work. I'm really excited about this. The etymology and derivation, where do we get the ger tzedek from? And this is a real doozy. I wasn't expecting that one, but we got it. I'm talking now the language of the ger tzedek. Last week we covered in the Moabim commentary who he is, where he is, why he is, ger code, ger this, ger that. Here we're going to get into the etymology. Where does the term ger tzedek come from? It's a rabbinic term, so it doesn't exist in the Chumash, the Torah, at all. Only in the times of the Talmud, rabbinic literature. But as anything, where does it come from in rabbinic literature? I believe we have our source now. And with that said, let the fun and games begin. Let's go ahead and get rid of the most complicated issues now, and it's only going to get easier from here, but pay attention. Zechariah, chapter 11, verses 12 and 13. He mentions 30 pieces of silver in a scripture that the Talmud and Midrash take way distant than we would have thought in the actual book itself. Pardon me, I'm not just looking at my notes because it's an intricate piece, so I'll come back to the camera momentarily. But I want to follow along my notes to get this right, because this is important stuff. This is the etymology of the ger tzedek, just so you know. Okay, Zechariah chapter 11, verses 12 and 13, it mentions 30 pieces of silver. And let's just go ahead and weigh in that the Midrash in Parashas Vayechi, as per the blessings of Jacob passed over to Judah, it says something very interesting. This is obviously Judah's blessing is of the King Messiah, Ad ki yavo Shiloh, when the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. Who is it? Who is this Shiloh, and when is he coming? What is he coming? Shiloh, they say, is the value in Gematria of Moses. Moshe here being the aspect of the Messiah. With that said, the Messiah only comes vis-a-vis his Talmudo, his scholarship, not for Israel, but so that the nations, the Goyim, will search out God. The Messiah's Talmudic literature scholarship is for the Goyim, literally nations. Many would think just the opposite. Not so. In that same passing Midrash, it says, in the idea of 30 pieces of silver, some say the 30 are the 30 additional commandments that will bond these exiles to Israel. 30 additional Noahide laws. Some say that they are the Giburim, mighty men, which that's where we get the name of the article from, of mighty men in merit. Merit, 30 mitzvahs, mighty men, 30 righteous Noahides of every generation. And how do you identify such a Noahide? He appears in every generation like Abraham. And they say, who are these mighty men and who are the mitzvot? They go to the Umot HaOlam, the nations of the world. Side point, before we get into the real juice here, there's a word in scripture, Yeh, in conjunction with Abraham. And Yeh is the gematria 30. 30 is the trigger that we learned that by Abraham there's a concept of 30 like him. It's pointed out by the nice gentleman filming the class right now. He heard it in Yeshiva Shalom Rav. In the future, Yeh is the name of God. On that day, Hashem is one, His name is one. Yeh is the gematria 30. Yud Hey, Yud Hey. And you work it out. How does it work to be a name of God in the future? This is a side point, but it's very interesting. Yud is like just like Yud K Vav K, right? Yud K, Yud K. So why do we say the Yud is in place of the Vav? It's a full set of 10 sfirot, a full power of God, instead of a lesser state of 6. And they say the masculine principle is of 6 extreme ends. But here it's magnified into a full power of 10 into the final Hey, which gives you a future messianic, not replacing Yud K Vav K, but on that day He is one, His name is one. And it's interesting is Yeh gematria 30 is the same gematria as Judah, which again, full circle, this is Judah's blessing. So nice little piece there. Now, as promised, the etymology of Ger Tzedek. Listen to this. This is huge. I am proud to be saying this. The Talmud of Chulin calls these 30 righteous men of every generation 30 Tzadikei Umot HaOlam. Now you probably are well aware of the term in the Rambam, Yisuri Bia 14:7, where we get the ability and possibility of the Noahide / Ger Toshav existing today, even without the Jubilee. The Rambam there says the Ger Toshav / Chasidei Umot HaOlam. Almost exactly the same expression. Only there, if you notice in the Rambam, it's Ger Toshav. Here, it's the Tzadikei Umot HaOlam. And why are they called Tzadikei? They have a special merit that every generation has 30 righteous, let's call it Noahide Gerim, that actually maintain the world. So you have, let's say, 1 million, billion, however many Noahides, Chasidei Umot HaOlam. And here you have the Tzadikei Umot HaOlam, another level. Now it's very simple. Chasidei brings you Ger Toshav just in the ratio. Right? You know the logic test they have, like finger is the hand, toe is the foot, right? So the Ger Toshav, Chasidei Umot HaOlam, the righteous of the nations. The Ger Tzedek would make sense in place of the Tzadikei Umot HaOlam. Why? Same word. The righteous nations, a righteous Ger. And what's the proof of the pudding? We compare it to Abraham. These 30 men are absolutely not Jewish. And they're compared to Abraham. And in case you missed, the commentaries of the Torah state explicitly Abraham is Ger Tzedek Rishon, the first Ger Tzedek. Now we're saying there are 30 of those guys. And you're saying there are 30 Ger Tzedek. Well, what are they called? Tzadikei Umot HaOlam. Now if that's not resonating with awesome, I don't know what is. Okay, enough of the fun and games. Again, into the article we go. What do you think? Was that awesome?
Good.
Again, just to clarify, Zechariah is the source of the 30 mighty men, Abraham, 30 mitzvahs, the real instigation of this concept. Now jump into Kedoshim, the concept, and we have, right off the bat, the idea that this is the entire Torah. They get it from Rashi and the Susei Chachamim, right in the beginning. It says, every man, Moses heard from God, every man has to come hear this. Now, I don't know from the Parsha yet. I just opened it up. So I don't know what's on the rest of the pages. I have no idea. All I know is Moses is being told by God, hey, gather the people, the entire community, so that every man will hear this. Ish, as opposed to Adam, to which the commentators suggest Adam is the klal, the group, the entire movement. Ish represents the individual. And this is a very powerful concept. Why does it say Ish? If you remember in the book of Deuteronomy, Parashas Kahal, Moses, the reading in front of the congregation, Moses is going to address the entire nation with the concept of the entire Torah. Now, is he going to read from Bereshit all the way to the end? No. What do the commentators say? He needs an avenue where the entire Torah / all the mitzvot can be stated in one earshot. And it's Parashas Kedoshim. This is your indoctrination to becoming holy. So right off the bat, keep Shabbos. That's what it says. And the Ish is there. The Ish is singular in language and not plural. Thus, it's in reference to each and every person there amongst the women, slaves, kids, Gerim, even Erev Rav, Israel proper, you name it. So the Ish makes it in a reading of the Torah for everybody has an identity. See, in today's Noahide world, it's just, the Noahides, the far out random Gerim. We don't know who you are. We don't want to know. Just be quiet, keep low, don't make a ruckus. And the Jewish world's very much like that as well. The Torah world. Just don't rock the boat. Don't get a name for yourself. But that's actually not what happened. It's not what happened with Moses. The idea was, with this word Ish, you, everybody there, Moses was talking to you. Now, this is Moses. They say when Bill Clinton gives a lecture, you feel like he's talking to you directly. He's telling you all right to you. I would have a hard time, you can bring up the whole speech impediment of Moses, but the Shekhinah is coming through his mouth. I have a hard time believing that Moses is not going to be felt and heard when the Shekhinah comes through. So every Ger standing at the event is going to have an identity experience. That means he understands his name, his goals, where he's going. He's not just an accidental tourist and, just thank you for letting me be here, ladies and gentlemen. I won't cause too many problems. That's not him. He's here. He's here to stay. He knows who he is. He's aware of his surroundings. So imagine the perspective. Every person has that feeling of identity. That means Moses did his job. They knew who they were in the grand scheme of things. Everybody was an individual. It says that everybody had a name in the desert. Based on the stars above, God has a number and name for them. So too, like this sand of the seashore. And the Gerim are part of Israel in this mission. It's the unaffiliated that doesn't come into holiness. Thus, Moses and Aaron knew the name, value, gematria of every soul. Because as the Vilna Gaon says, in every name comes your mission, your identity, your mazal, your blessings from God, your life relationship with God. God relates to you. He says, hey, I'm calling you by name. He does that. He calls you by name. So when that name is aroused, your internal nameness comes up. So if your name is Bob, Bob resonates. If your name is Stu, Stu resonates. Whatever your name is, when God calls you, your soul trembles inside. That's the relationship. You might call it a bad day, however you internalize it, but when God calls you by name, there's an identity going on, a relationship. Everybody there had that happening. There was no such thing as the generic air. Let's get into the Messiah Noahide relationship. We mentioned the 30 commandments will be instituted by the Messiah. But where is the precedent for such a relationship? Aside from the Midrash. Psalm 72, verses 5 and 6, even the whole Psalm 72, is the charge of King David over to King Solomon. David saying, look, I figured it out. I know what it's all about. It's universal Torah. It's the rectification of mankind. If you're going to stay tribal, it'll never happen. Right? If you're going to leave out the nations, no good. Everybody has a place. Everybody needs to be a part of this team called humanity. Solomon, as we know, quickly was regarded as the wisest man who ever lived. And David's full aware of this. And he says, you have wisdom. And wisdom is not for naught. Wisdom is given so that you shall judge righteously. Tzedek b'mishpat. Righteous and just. Right? If you have a tool, it's not to put on your wall a trophy, look at my tool. You use the tool. And the tool is best used, as the Zohar points out, as King David points out, in Noahide law. Because only from the fear of God on the highest level, which remember King Solomon says, in the end of Ecclesiastes, when it's all said and done, fear God and keep his mitzvahs. That fear of God is a level attained to bring down Noahide law from judgment to a merciful rectification. The goal is not to see how many Noahides we can kill every day for stealing less than a pruta. That's not the goal. The goal is to go out amongst the nations, elevate mankind, elevate humanity by extending the 7 laws to all, and getting everybody involved in Torah. Showing how the Torah works, making Gerim essentially. Bringing it in within Torah law. It's no more a capital punishment. The punishment becomes a regular Torah punishment in the standard universal currency, to which the Rambam alludes, the world in the end will be Ger Toshav. At least. Thus, this is what David is saying to Solomon. Take your wisdom and go out and elevate mankind. The Zohar says explicitly the 7 laws were designated as like a bait to get people interested in the Torah. The analogy of this, or the fractal core of that concept, is between Shem and Abraham. Again, here's your Abraham analogy. 30 mighty men, every generation, very apropos. Thus Solomon, as the king on the Temple Mount, take your wisdom, innovate Noahide law, master Noahide law, master the Torah, master wisdom. Don't make the Noahide like a poor man who just gets dumped on. Right? Don't leave him out of the judgment, but don't favor in favor of him despite the regular, let's say, Torah observant person to compensate. Be just. Be righteous. Be what it's about. Thus you have every type of Noahide non-Jew in the world the king, the Messiah, has to know the demographic, the spiritual level, every type of goy. Now, why do King David makes very special mention. There are umot, there are amim, there are goyim. There's a couple more. There's different words to use and classify different nations. This nation has a religion that's in unison of God. This nation congregates only for the common language. This nation congregates only for the land. So you can ascertain a wisdom of looking at the map, right? And it's not going to be a literal. We're all evangelical Christians on this island, so that's our demographic. The world's diverse today, so you slant not with a forward progression, but go lateral, right? And use mazal. That's wisdom, right? This island here. What is the nature? Are they of like mind, one language? But let's say the language is not a literal identifier of common language. Are they involved in the same things? Do they religiously do things? Are they interested in God as they understand God? You're not going to get a nation, a sign saying we believe in Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's not happening. We would see it now. But if there's no nation right now that stands on earth as, we are the Yud Kei Vav Kei people, we would know it on CNN. So it could be that there are nations that understand God in their own way, in their own language, in their own culture. But as is the problem with humanity, and what King David tells King Solomon, you need to learn how to articulate humanity to humanity. Because they might have a understanding with a vernacular that you're not accustomed to. We religiously drink tea every day at 4 o'clock, for context. Just culture exists. Culture can be religious, it can be a language, but not in the literal sense. It can get quite figurative. Messiah's job is to have the wisdom and insight to bring justice and righteousness and Torah to those nations. So, what is the story with the mitzvahs? In the Parsha is a root of every mitzvah in the whole Torah. The whole Torah we see. That's not so much a challenge. Famous teaching by either Rabbi Akiva, his version, or Hillel. The entire Torah can be considered that which is hateful to you, to your neighbor, do not do. Or in other words, love your neighbor as yourself. That's our parsha. Everybody says that's the whole Torah, along with the righteous lives on in his faith. And the question arises by the Ramban, can you really love your neighbor as yourself? Is that possible? I'm not you, right? Do I love you? And he says, no, you don't. Maybe you'll say you do, but most people don't. So how do you fulfill that commandment as such? He brings an example. If I want to win a lottery ticket for $1 million, then don't say about your neighbor, yeah, he can win $20, 40. You have to have the same desire for your neighbor. If I win $1 million in this lottery, so should he. And that's the beginning of love thy neighbor. It goes without saying, there is a wormhole to love, and that is the union of the Jew and the Ger as expressed in Song of Songs. That's the the way out that nobody saw. But the idea is that the whole Torah is technically, in this way, impossible to fulfill. And some systems of mitzvahs are impossible to fill, and some are possible. The 10 Commandments are impossible to fulfill. Right? The basic primal instincts of man make it that you're not going to do it. Let's say on the ultimate, din, judgment level. Right? You never coveted anything in your life. You never saw one thing that you said, hey, I'd like to have that. Of course you did. Now, you didn't act on it, and you were not transgressing. But did you ever break Shabbos? You never once scratched your head and the hair came out, and that transgresses one of the laws of Shabbos. Of course you did. But God is merciful, and there are ways of incurring penalty. But the idea is a system that ideally you cannot say, ladies and gentlemen, I am perfect, I do nothing wrong, I fulfill and keep the 10 Commandments perfect. No, you don't. But let's say rabbinically you may, and God finds favor with that. Another system that you don't keep is the 7 laws of Noah. Right? It's such a strict penal system that you're not keeping it. There's no way. That's why it's a positive endeavor to become a ger. Because you leave the realm of a world of impossibility and where doubt and darkness reign over the performance of a mitzvah. That's why the penalty is so harsh for the 7 laws. Now, there's certain, you're not going to get killed if you break it and a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. There's a way to incur penalty. But the goal is to move into a system that's not so dangerous. To leave the judgment and enter the realm of mercy. And that is ideally when the ger grows in Torah and mitzvahs, he's in a realm, in a cycle of mercy. When the Jew is, let's say, involved in that 7 laws also, then he's also getting in a merciful condition. And not only that, but when the two come together, you actually will rectify. The primal desire for stealing, coveting, blasphemy goes away. It's rectification. The Jew, let's say, who is not keeping Shabbos to par, will find that his behavior becomes repaired. The 3 laws of Noah. Now, in that same Gemara in Chulin, about the 30 laws being given, it says there also that Tzadikei Umot HaOlam maintain the world through 3 laws of Noah. No gay marriages, no cannibalism, uphold the Torah. And the world pulls that off. That's every ruling nation is expected to maintain that mantle. It's said that after World War II, get the story right, I think it was either Germany or Britain, Britain had previously held the mantle of the 3-law empire. And by the fall of World War II, it was seen that at least both of those nations were not going to maintain control because they had already given up that quota. But America, young America, was prime for those 3. Gay was practically illegal. There was no cannibalism. And Torah values-ish were there. So I think it was Churchill who predicted, after World War II, look for America to blow up. And they did. They did. Now, we are X amount of years later, and I think it's safe to say, look for America to implode. And they are. They've given up all 3. in some figurative, literal fashion. And ironically, I've blogged about this, but think about it. Russia is pulling off all three. You cannot be gay in Russia. We see that Islam is like when they win a war of gangs, they're eating the hearts of their victims and stuff like that. Well, that's not happening in Russia as a people. And Putin put up a menorah somewhere in like one of the famous squares. And you see, Russia's doing a lot of stuff. Just saying. Maybe somebody else is doing a better job. But it looks like whoever takes the mantle of policeman of the world, the golden ticket are those three laws. And then you have the 30 new laws that basically kind of bring all this into fruition. If the Messiah brought the 30, then you've accomplished the 7 and the 3. 7 and 3 is 10. Jewish people married the Messiah along with the Gerim. There you have a perfection of the mitzvahs, 613. Jewish people taking on the 7 laws as a common work effort, 620. There's a lot of numbers here. The idea is the mitzvahs just kind of mush together in an ideal world, the Jew and the Ger. They work collectively together and individually together. The 30, that's the function of the 30. It says that those 30 bring the exile nations into a graft of Israel. The Rambam calls that nilvim, those that are attached to Israel. Those 30 are the attachment. These 30 laws are in our Parsha. At the end of this class, we're going to go over those 30 and how they function in the Parsha, but they're there. And that's why we get into this talk. The whole Parsha, you can identify the 7 laws, the 3 laws, the 10 laws, the 613 laws, and the 30 laws. Everything is in our Parsha, along with love your neighbor as yourself. The idea that it's too hard to do, the idea of the righteous lives in his faith, the entire Torah is in our Parsha. When we get to the book of Devarim, you can see, as it's called, the review of the Torah. Every Parsha in Devarim, you can really find a system that it literally is the review of the whole Torah in some way, shape, or form in every Parsha. And we're seeing this now in Kedoshim, which you can make what's called a binyan of. Every Parsha, if you look and you dig, some more prominent than others, you can find the entire Torah as a fractal just over and over every Parsha. But it takes on a different flavor and theme. So let's say, I'm making this up for context, right? This Achrei Mot is the retelling of Bereshit to Devarim. Kedoshim is all of the mitzvahs. Tazria is a retelling of creation. Whatever it is, your job is to find what's called the Melchin, that intellect of the whole Torah in every Parsha. Because it's there, if you look. And the last part of the Parsha that's really phenomenal is, why are the 30 laws here? I mean, who cares? Maybe it's an accident, but whatever it is, there's more to the story. Right from the beginning of the Parsha, it's, to become holy, the man, Moses tell every man, you need to keep Shabbos. And then you go through all the kosher and the framework and its infrastructure to have those 30 laws. There's a large, vast breadth of Torah. But if you look in between the cracks, the entire Parsha doubles as equally possible for the Ger. The ger toshav can keep Shabbos. The ger is called ish. Leave over the fruits for the ger in the field. Don't taunt the ger. All through the parsha, there's all kinds of ger imagery. And one of the most fascinating ones, there's a famous teaching by the Maharal of Prague. In the parsha, it mentions you will rise for a sage. Don't taunt the ger. They come right one after another. He makes a wonderful teaching. He says like this. We talked about this a couple of parshas ago. In Metzora, I think it was. The Messiah is a chacham, a wise man. The Messiah is outside the camp because he has intellect. And the world is not intellectual, it's actually physical. So, a physical world, if you're not physical, you're intellectual, you're out. Intellect is called a ger in this world. Intellect is a ger in this world. A ger is called a skin disorder, a sapachat. There's a lot of dots in the circular argument here, right? Okay, a ger is sapachat. Sapachat is a skin condition out of the camp. A ger is also intellect, which is not physical, which is already contradictory to the world. So Messiah is a ger, he is a metzora, he is out of the camp, he is wise, he is intellect. The Messiah is a wise man. You could also say he's a sage. Thus the sage, again, is the wise man, the intellect, the whole story. Messiah is just the king of the sages. And the next comparison is the ger. So they learn, the Maharal learns, just as is the ger who follows the wise man is the Messiah, they're both together. For that, Messiah is called a ger. King David says, I am a ger. And this parsha is the teaching of that. In fact, in the Shemona Esrei, what does it say? The tzaddikim, the chasidim, the this, the that, and the gerei tzedek. So he says that blessing is this whole idea, right? The wise man, the smart man, the scribe, right? The gerei tzedek there is the non-Jew, says the Maharal, in our famous saga with the gerei tzedek, which we prove today, etymology-wise, right? That's from the Maharal of Prague. And our parsha is the source of that. So you see, that whole idea, just of the ger and magnitude, this whole Messiah, wisdom, intellect, King David, all of this, our parsha. Don't taunt the ger. 46 times in the Torah. Don't taunt the ger. Our parsha. Love your neighbors yourself. Our parsha. Your neighbor, guess who's included in your neighbor? The ger. Shabbos. For Jews, yes, but also for the ger. Ger Toshav, Krisis 9a. So you have a whole parsha that's very Jewish. Right? It's all Jewish. So I thought. But if you look between the cracks, the whole parsha becomes really another parallel universe. A ger world emerges in our parsha. Thus, you have the whole Torah given to Israel, and this is such an awesome concept. The whole Torah is given to the ger in the same parsha, same words, same everything. The Jew will see it very Jewish, and the ger can see it very ger, and it's not a contradiction. It's not any type of contradiction. They're just there. From the mouth of God, I heard too. Mepia Gevora, from the mouth of God, we heard too. That's why the entire Torah is in our parsha. It really is. Now, we have a list in the article of the 30 commandments. I want to make this known. I'm going to read. Follow along in your Chumash. I don't know if you have the Chumash, right? Follow along from the beginning as I go, okay? Okay, you have 7 Noahide laws, last time I checked, right? And those 7 become categories. Again, in literal, idolatry, blasphemy, we know the 7 laws. And there are 30 new laws that come within the 7, giving you 37. I don't know if this matters. That's the Gematria Hevel, or Abel, the son of Adam. I mean, the ger, the repair of Abel. I'm sure there's something there. Also, Halev, the heart. Maybe that's the circumcision of the heart. I'm just brainstorming. It's interesting. Avodah Zorah. Avodah Zorah, idolatry. What is fantastic about idolatry, you would never think that of all the Parashas, right? And we're saying the 30 laws come here. What are the chances of Molech passing your child through fire? What are the chances of it being here? I mean, I expected it to be a drasha, right? You can say it's like the Gematria, this is not true, but the Gematria Ish is the Gematria Molech. Ah, so that must be Molech. Look at this. Shabbos is the Gematria this. And you make really far and few really conclusions that matter, rabbinic drasha at best, to show the 30 laws are here. But that's not what happened. That's the best part of this. That's not what happened here. It really mentions Molech, passing your kid through fire. It really mentions the serving other gods. It really mentions Ma'onin. And that's like one of the most random Avodah Zorahs in the whole thing. It's one of the mitzvahs, one of the 613. Don't do Ma'onin. And we say, what's Ma'onin? I mean, I don't know what that is. Why is that a mitzvah? And the fact is here, right now, Menachesh, guessing, divining. So all of our friends that we say, weird, random mitzvah, not my ball game, and you say, okay, it happens to be in Kedoshim. It happens to be in Kedoshim. But when you look at the sum, the whole sum of Kedoshim, there's another world of 30 Noahide laws that no one's ever heard of. It's brought down, though, in Chulin, and they're explained and listed in the tractate Sanhedrin. And you look at them and you say, look at this. They're actually present in our Parsha. And not by some stretch of the imagination. Right? Sorcery. Chover chaver. Incantations. Consulting the dead. Yedoni. I'm not mentioning them all, but necromancy. I mean, right there. They're nowhere else to be found. Now, sexual sins. Comes our Parsha. And there's a whole list, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, sexual sins. By the way, fruitful and multiply, everybody wants it to be a Noahide law, because it's obvious, and that is one of them. To be fruitful and multiply. Your gay marriage is here. There's one of the 3. Upholding Torah is one of them. There's 2 of the 3. The 3 Noahide laws. And cannibalism, the last law we have, human flesh. So the 3 are in the 30, the 7 are in the 30. Okay. The kilayim, grafting and strange service of the land. What are the chances of that being in our Parsha? Bingo. In our Parsha. Amnon, you see it? Amnon, you see it? It's in our Parsha. Grafting trees, all this stuff. It's with the weird Avodah Zarah. with the in illicit relations, with the kosher. I mean, it's all here. It says explicitly out of nowhere, don't kill. I mean, okay, I expect that to be in the Torah, but they're all right here. It says explicitly in the Parashah not to kill and steal. Okay. Blasphemy is in there. The Torah, the whole idea, stand for a sage. And in comparison to the Maror with the Ger. I mean, it's a huge teaching. And there it is. There it is. Stealing. Explicitly there in the Torah. And again, you have the idea of the Maror with the sage and the Ger and the Seichel and the Metzora and the Moshiach. It's there. Setting up courts of law. There. Eating the flesh of a live animal. The parsha ends with kashrus, the kosher verses about how to eat. So that's it. The parsha is that. So let's go ahead and review, just to say what we did. This is I know it ended a little loose, but on the blog, solmazal.blogspot.com, the article listed, you can see a list of the 30 additional commandments. And feel free to go back into the Parsha and connect the dots. It's not that hard. It's literally there. We now covered, why are you holy? You're holy because you're taking on more commandments. You're bringing in the new light into this world, the messianic light with the Moshiach and the 30 laws and the Ger who's not in this world with intellect. And you're literally in this Parsha. Moses is reading this to everybody in the camp. You're bringing in a light in this parsha that was never here. Right? There's only 613 commandments. Then you say, just boil it down to 10. But then you look and you say, the 7, 3, and 30 are all here. And it was dormant. We never talk about it, express it. You get into the Ger, and that is an additional holiness coming in. Why? The Torah blows up. All of a sudden, there's things here we never saw. And they've been there the whole time. You have the idea of this, righteous men like Abraham, the root of the Ger Tzedek. The root. Maintaining the world, as it says in Chulin. The whole Torah, love your neighbors yourself, which comes in with the Ger. It's all here. It's all here. That's why Moses read it to everybody, and from this you'll see just why the Ger is holy. Now you know why he's bringing a light of Olam Haba into our lives this week. He merges with Israel as the Noviim, they're called. On Purim, also the attachment to Israel, the Gerim saw the victory, they attached to Israel, they're called Noviim. For that reason, Gerim are instructed to keep Purim as well. Everybody has an identity. And you see now, the 30, it just speaks of an identity. You feel the Ger here is not just some stranger, and he's eating of my crops, and I don't know. He's there. Once you bring in the 30 laws, it brings in a real Yerushalayim. Because he's real. Those 30 are not an accident. At all. Divinely placed. For that reason, Moses read this to the nation. The whole Torah is here. The Messiah code is here. The Ger is here. The sources are literally there. The keeping of Shabbos is there. In the end, you are holy when you take on this. The whole thing, whatever you do. The Noahide's taking on more and more as they go. And the Jews, let's say, getting acquainted with this. But just to be indoctrinated on the first ground here, that's the path to holiness. That's where the light of the Messiah begins. 30 laws. And you can start to understand, love your neighbor. The Jew and the Ger get together. The secret of Song of Songs is right there. So in a really terse bullet point, what we did, we learned how we're going to become holy, how the Messiah will relate to the Noahides, how the Ger has an identity, how the whole Torah is here involving love your neighbor plus the Ger. We saw how every word in this parsha matters, is divinely placed, and represents the whole Torah. And for that, we now had a little dose of Moses reading the whole Torah to Israel. We might not have gotten the whole Torah right now, but we can finally see a light, a new light, that in one parsha, it really can contain the whole Torah. And for 1 second, with the 30 laws in focus, we saw how it's possible, how Moses could speak to every man with an identity. They would all stand there, and from the mouth of Moses, each one would receive the revelation of a new light, really of Olam Haba quality, a messianic feeling, that he just received the whole Torah. And we're coming up on Shavuos, the giving of the Torah. We should all be meritorious to receive and accept the whole Torah, akin to Moses himself at Sinai, on the level of the Messiah, which is called Malchus Moshe, the kingdom of Moses, Moshe Mashiach, Moses the Messiah, Moshe V'Trei Mashiachin, Moses and the two Messiahs, Ben David, Ben Yosef. May it be soon in our days, B'ezrat Hashem, this year. Amen.